Hello everyone, I'm Liz Haywood and I'm very pleased to be able to share with you my design process for how I make zero waste patterns. My background is that I trained as a pattern maker in 1990 and 91, but I started my career as a junior cutter in a swimwear factory and then for 20 years worked in the fashion industry as either a pattern maker or a cutter or both. And I worked mostly here in Australia and for a short time in London. 10 years ago we had a family and moved to the country and my career moved sideways, so I now teach sewing and write and make patterns. I'm the author of Dressmaker's Companion, a sewing reference. It's a no frills encyclopedia type book, and as we all know, understanding garment construction is the key to making usable patterns that work. And I'm also the author of Zero Waste Sewing, which came out earlier this year, unfortunately in the same week that we locked down, but you just can't predict these things 6 months ahead. So Zero Waste Sewing is a collection of 16 zero waste sewing patterns based around 3 cutting themes: a top from square, the famous bog coat and tessellated patterns, and there are ideas in there for getting started with your own zero waste patterns. So I now write PDF zero waste patterns. I prefer this format to a book because I'm not restricted to page numbers and I feel like I can put more in them. I originally read about zero waste patterns from Holly and Timo's book, and I immediately clicked with it because I was already a pattern maker and I already had a lot of years experience making markers, and as we know, the two go together. So how do I go about making a zero waste pattern? I don't use a computer at all to draft patterns, partly because I don't know how, but mostly because I don't enjoy sitting in front of a screen as much as I like doing and making with paper and fabric. I'm very much a flat pattern maker. I don't really do draping all that much. So I have a sketchbook where I write down ideas, and the ideas come in the form of a cutting layout. So sometimes it's a mini challenge. For example, could I make a top from a perfect square of fabric? So there's a challenge inside the zero waste challenge. And sometimes I see people wearing clothes, or people wearing clothes in magazines or in books, and I think, maybe I could try that in zero waste. So here's an example from my sketchbook. So this is an Armani dress, which I thought, I think that could be zero waste, and that's, so when I stuck it in my sketchbook, that's the little idea I had. So the yoke is the armholes. So when I have an idea, I go from the idea straight to fabric, and I don't use calico. I try and use a wearable fabric so that it can be finished off and worn by someone. But I don't use fabric that's too special, just in case I get it all wrong. I use a Winifred Aldrich ordinary block, like you do when you learn pattern making. I use one of these just to give me a guide for size as I go. And then when I have cut it out in fabric, I pin it together and try it on all pinned together. I use pins without heads because they're not so sharp. That's what I do for most of my patterns. Occasionally I use a Barbie doll, because we've got them in the house, and just try something out with Barbie. I like Soccer Barbie the best because she's posable. I cut out garments in my size so that I can try them on, and I keep very detailed notes as I'm cutting and sewing, and it takes me about a day to invent, cut and sew a garment, and then it takes about another 4 to 6 weeks to write sewing instructions and illustrate and that sort of thing. Size inclusivity is important to me, and the number one question that people ask me about zero waste sewing is large ladies ask me, is there anything I can make from this book? And the answer is yes, you can make almost everything from this book. So with PDF patterns, I strive for 12 or more sizes, and if I can't do it in 12 sizes, then I won't do it. when I've got the first garment sorted, I make it in bigger sizes and then I fit test on friends who are appropriately sized. And sometimes the fit test garments become the ones we end up photographing. It is really hard to do zero waste in lots of sizes, and most often what I do is just turn the fabric around so I'm cutting across the fabric. An example is this blouse which I have just done, which has a very simple cutting layout like this. So see how the selvage is at the top and the bottom, and I'm cutting across, and so as it gets bigger it'll just take up more fabric. But I have produced this top with a simple dirndl skirt, which, as we know, is just a rectangle gathered into a waistband, and that means I can actually cut this around the other way. So I'll put it this way, so the selvage is at the top and bottom again, and see how I've got the top, and then these skirt panels soak up all the extra fabric, which gives you a lot more flexibility with the kind of fabrics you use, because you can use one-way prints and things with naps, and you can cut the skirt and the top all together, all in the same direction. This is a zero waste hoodie top, which I didn't cut around the other way. I cut it the regular way, how we usually cut clothes. So here's the layout. So the selvage is here and at the top, and so the front and back are here, and the width of the fabric is like the wingspan, the sleeve to sleeve of the top. So you can see all the details go along the sides, and as the top gets wider we get less and less fabric for the details, so I just kept adding fabric on the end to use for that. It was really hard, and I nearly gave up because there were 12 sizes and practically every size had a different tweak on the layout. Some people have asked what I do with the neck cut out when I make zero waste patterns. I almost always use it as a back neck facing, but in this puff sleeve I've cut it in half and used it to beef out the gathers in the sleeve a bit more. This is what the sleeve looks like this. Just a couple more things about construction. I use 12mm bias binding quite a lot for finishing the necks, and I finish it as a facing because I don't need any extra fabric for it, and it makes a very neat finish. So there's a photographic tutorial for how to do this on my website, lizhaywood.com.au, in the January 2020 archive. Thanks for watching.